This is jpeg2RAW, show number 28, I think. And tonight we have a great show. We're going to have our regular co-host Kathleen and Tim, and we're also going to have Sarah come back on at some point in time and pick a winner in that giveaway. And we also have a special guest who's going to talk about focus with us in just a minute. But before we get to that, Tim, how are you doing?
Very good, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing good. And you got a new camera in the mail today, didn't you?
Just got it in the mail today, my Sony Alpha A77. It's on the charging right now next to me. So that
Nice.
As soon as this is over, I will be playing with it.
Kathleen, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys? I'm a little raspy and under the weather, but I feel fine, so I'm excited to be here.
All right. And our special guest is Dragos. Dragos, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Hey, Dragos, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
And for anybody who is...
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for coming. We're going to draw on you a little bit later for talk about focus issues and how focus works in different cameras, and also get your feedback on the news we're about to cover. Before we do, I wanted to say one thing is that if you're watching this from a mobile device, I know we have somebody try to watch it from an iPad or from your Android phone or something like that. I do have a link below the chat to another page on our website that is a reduced quality, a smaller video, reduced quality, but it was good for mobile streaming. So if you want to watch this from mobile streaming live, that should work. We'll see. I tried it with my iPhone. No, I don't have an iPhone. With my Android phone, and it worked fine. And the beauty is the chat is shared between the two of them. So if you're in that one or this one, we're still sharing the chat. Kathleen, you don't look impressed. That was a pretty impressive thing to do.
Well, I mean, I'm impressed, but I mean, what do you want me to do?
I don't know. Give me a cheer.
Yay!
So the big news, I think it was actually announced today, officially, it was rumored for a while, is the Nikon D800, 36.3 megapixels. Huge.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
And
I mean,
with a
mine has 21 megapixels, and I thought that was crazy when I bought that.
I just worry about what the processing power you're going to need on the computer, how much more hard drives you're going to need. I mean, there's got to be an end to it. And I actually have read something about 100 megapixel coming out.
Well, let me just say, the street price is right at $3,000, and there is a second version of it. There's a D800E or something like that, I think it is, that removes the anti-aliasing or how do you say that word?
Aliasing?
There you go. That's why we have you on. Basically, the thing that removes moire, if you ever looked at, like, somebody has a funny shirt on or something that creates all kind of lines in there, that filter removes that, but it does some of that removal by blurring the image slightly. And in some fields, maybe some studio work or some landscape, you may not want that because you want the sharpest picture you can possibly get. So there's a second version of the D800 that has that filter removed, or I've actually read there's maybe another filter in there that counters it. So maybe it's not removed; it's just countered. I don't know.
You have to pick which one, or how does it come standard?
You have to pick which one. The normal one will have the normal filter that everybody's used to. Now the 800 series is the replacement for the 700 series, which is I hate to say pro bodies or not pro bodies, but it's not necessarily their pro body. It doesn't have the built-in vertical flash or vertical grip. It doesn't have it does have a flash. I don't think it has all the weather sealing as the pro line. And the frames per second is not going to be quite as robust. It's going to be, I think, 4 frames per second without the battery attached to the bottom, and with the battery attached to the bottom, the add-on grip, I think it's 6 frames per second. And like Tim, you said, I think the RAW files in full resolution are like 76 meg or something crazy like that.
That's humongous. Just imagine trying to transfer that data.
Yeah, I know. And I've gone back and forth because I have a D2X and a D2H, and they're definitely aging. Probably everybody on the show and everybody listening to the show has newer cameras than that. And where they're aging is they're 2 generations behind in noise. So mine are really noisy. My D2X at 800 ISO 800 is pretty noisy. So I really need something new.
Is there a way to limit like, you know, it has 36 megapixels, but is there a way to limit how many you want to use? Is that just by taking it from RAW down to a JPEG?
Well, it probably has different settings in there for small, medium, and large, which most cameras have, so that you can have the different resolutions in there. And
Even
I'm
within
sure
a
that
RAW
has to be in it.
file?
No, I think that's
Well-
just in a JPEG. Now they do have
Oh, that's right.
they do have it's the FX format, which means it's full screen, but they have the DX format, which then is a cropped thing. So even the RAW file, I think in that situation would be cropped, and that's when you, if you want to shoot 6 frames per second, you've got to shoot in DX mode. So you know, there is that you can do, but you know, I don't know how useful that would be. It's probably better than what the way my D2X does it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of my downfall because I don't personally want to be messing around with that many megapixels, and I don't want to stop shooting in RAW just to not clog up my system. So for me, that's kind of a setback that they've crammed so many megapixels into that camera.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny that back when I got my D2X, there were rumors that it was beyond what the lens can resolve. That 12 megapixels were beyond what a normal lens can resolve. And of course, that's coming back up again now. You know, obviously, it's not beyond what a normal lens can resolve because there's cameras that have gone beyond that since then. But you know, if you read some of the forums, like over on DP Review and everything, the questions come up again: is this beyond what a normal lens can resolve? And yeah, there's mixed feelings there.
Like, are you outdating all of your other equipment basically by going to a camera with these capabilities?
Yeah, so I see some of the same comments coming up that came up when the D2X came out, and probably some of the other cameras in between. I just haven't paid a lot of attention to them. That one, they've out-resolved the lenses. Two, they've packed in the megapixels so tightly that it is extremely prone to the handshake. You know, if you don't have a really fast shutter speed, you're going to get shake because of the sensor being so densely packed.
Hmm.
Well, I'll tell you, I thought the race on megapixels was over. Obviously, it isn't yet, and I really didn't think I was going to see it.
Because for a novice, for the people who have the money, who just want to buy a camera and they don't know, it's a sales pitch tool for Best Buy. I mean, seriously, you sit there and you say, you know, this one has 21, but this one has 36. And for someone who doesn't know the difference, they're going to lay the money down if they have it for the bigger number because they've been told by the salesperson that that's what matters. And it doesn't. It's just a sales ploy, which is kind of disappointing because these cameras should be being marketed to photographers who know better than to think they need this.
Well, I got to think that somebody's spending $3,000, if they want to just waste their money on one number without researching. I mean, I looked at my camera for a long time before I bought it. I can't imagine just going out and spending $3,000 without knowing what everything means.
Yeah, Scott had a good point, though. He says he's wondering if the megapixels will come into play with the video side of it. Dragos, what's that like in the video world?
I'm trying to multitask. What was it exactly that you said? Because I was looking at what.
We were talking about the megapixels feeling like it was a waste in the photography world, but does it make a difference in the video world as for megapixels?
Not really, because you're still taking like a percentage of that of those megapixels. Like on usual DSLRs, like 12 megapixels or 21 megapixels, it would, you know, you're making, what it does is it doesn't take that 36 megapixels, let's say, and compress it down to full HD, which is 1920 by 1080. It will actually pick up a pixel. It will skip like one or two lines of pixel, and then it will read another one. It will skip 2 pixels, and it will read another one. So it doesn't necessarily read the whole image, the whole sensor, every pixel on the sensor, and then shrinks it down, because that would be a lot of compression.
Right.
It would have to calculate so much data. What it does, it skips lines, so it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, 100 megapixels, you're still just getting 1920 by 1080. Now, of course, you know, the ISO comes in play and all that, you know, so people like high ISO or whatnot.
Do you agree when we say that?
But yeah, there is a lot of fashion photographers that couldn't, you know, afford a Hasselblad or Phase 1 or Mamiya you know, they were getting the 5D Mark II because it had 21, and then the Nikon came out with the with 24 megapixels, and then yeah, you couldn't shoot weddings, you know, in low light with it, but if you were to shoot a wedding outside, I mean, 24 megapixels is great, you know, if you were a Nikon, because the next step down would be like the 12 megapixel, you know, so you can make much bigger prints for fashion because you need it. You know, you could make twice the image with the 24 than you can with the 12. You know, and for fashion, when you're making a billboard, you want as much detail as possible. Or for products or anything.
People who are doing like billboard size work, it would be useful.
Right, and that can't afford, let's say, you know, it's kind of like, just like DSLRs now is doing like film for on a budget, you know, because you're paying like a fraction of the price for a good camera with good lenses. Same thing, it's like getting a nice fashion photography camera without paying $40,000 or, you know, $30,000 now. The medium format cameras went, you know, a little down in price, but you're still not paying tens of thousands of dollars when you could do it with this, because you're shooting in the studio. I know it, you know, it's shooting 14-bit or 12-bit converted to 14-bit or something like that, versus the 16-bit that all the medium formats shoot at, or some of the higher end ones. So you have a lot more color data with those. It's just, you know, you're paying $3,000 instead of $30,000.
Yeah, well,
and you're shooting in the studio. You got light. You got enough light. You're shooting at f11 anyways. You know, ISO 50 or whatever.
And there's one other group that could use it too, and that is, you know, landscape photographers.
Right.
Landscape photographers always want more megapixels. So a lot of landscape photographers use medium format or even large format. So, you know, even at 36 megapixels, you're just now approaching, you know, medium format, and so it can still go beyond that. So I think for, you know, for sports and for some other things, it may not be the best thing, but, you know, it's definitely, you haven't reached the top end of what people can find uses for it.
Right.
Yeah. For me personally, you know, I had always thought my next camera would be the D3S, getting it used, you know, refurb, hoping I can get it below $4,000 as a refurb. Now this one's got me thinking. You know, for me, I'm not a pro. I don't make money off my images. You know, I do shoot my kids' sports, but my son is indoors. You know, he's a swimmer, so I need as much ISO performance as I can get. You know, the lower the noise at the higher ISO, the better. But even with that, he's only going to swim 10, 20 meets a year. I don't need to spend $4,000 for 10, 20 meets a year. That parents are going to see a thumbnail-size image on the website. You know, what's the point there? So it's got me thinking about whether I want to replace my current gear with a D800 or hold out for the D3S to come down in price.
How many megapixels are on the D700?
I think it's
12 point something.
Yeah, which is what the D3S and D3 are also the 12, which is what my D2X is. My D2X is 12.
Okay.
Yeah, and same thing with a D700 and
Scott's saying the D3, I can get a D3 for $3,000. That's the thought too, but I think the D3S added the video, and I think at this time, if I'm going to buy a new DSLR, because I keep mine for a while, I want it to have video capabilities.
Well, and here's the thing: does the D3S, are the video capabilities? Does it have an autofocus feature on it? Because I find that on my 5D Mark II, because I'm not into cinematography, it's not simply that I can just turn it on and get great videos. Like, that's a whole other side of things that I would have to really study and learn how to use.
That's true. I don't think these things autofocus like your camera, like your phone or a regular HD.
Right. I mean, if you're going to buy it to have video, like, you need to have the conscious mind that that's something that you're going to have to dive into and learn how to use, or it's just a waste. I had no idea when I bought mine, because that was part of my deciding factor between the Nikon and the Canon at the time. Was at the time the two that I was comparing, the Canon had the video, but I can count on one hand the number of times I've used it and walked away frustrated, not because it's bad. It's a great video system, but I just don't know how to use it, and I don't have time to invest into it. So.
Hey, Dragos, watch this.
Yeah, I just saw that.
Well, the
Sorry.
good thing about my camera there, Kath, it focuses with video while it's operating. Because it's an SLT with a translucent lens, it's no longer got a mirror in there, so the focusing works full time all the time.
Oh, see, that's really nice. Yeah, because I mean, if I was going to get into cinematography, then the 5D Mark II is certainly the way to go. But that wasn't my purposes for having it personally. It was just having it more for my kids and my family on the side.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the autofocus, it's not very user friendly,
No.
but it can be very good for creative stuff, you know. And you were saying about like I was thinking you should get a D3S. Well, I mean, it's if you want that high frames per second, for your kid swimming or whatnot.
Right.
And it does have video, but I mean, even the D700, unless you want video on a DSLR, I mean, the D700 would be pretty good, and it would be half the price of a D3S, and probably better than the D800 noise-wise, because the pixels aren't so packed. But I'm not sure. Like, I would probably wait until they come out with some comparison photos.
Absolutely.
And and see, because that'd be the only thing is high ISO. What does it look like?
Well,
Yeah, it's almost. Sorry, go ahead.
well, like I was mentioning before, unlike you guys, I don't make money for my photos, so I can wait. I can wait for other people to buy the D800, test it, and say what's good and what's bad about it, and then decide from there. I'm getting a note from Sarah, so hold on a second. Why don't you guys go ahead and talk without me?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. Like, my first knee-jerk reaction is quick, yank out the credit card and go buy the new D800. But I'd feel more comfortable letting someone else test it out for a test drive. Hindsight's 20/20, and there's always something great about every camera, and then each camera has its own set of limitations, and depending upon the kind of style of photography you do is how you choose which camera is going to help you excel. So I'd like to see what people are saying its limitations are going to be before I would purchase.
Well, I mean, you look at it, other than 36 megapixels, it doesn't seem like a step up from a lot of the other things you can get in other current cameras already. So now you're talking about a $3,000 body camera, which is a pretty big step up for a lot of people. I can't see, you'd have to really wow me with other factors. And 36 megapixels, I can count the number of times I've had enlargements where I said, man, I wish I had more megapixels on this. So I don't see a need for it. And my current camera is going to have 24, which is more than I'm going to need. But I just don't see the need for it.
Yeah.
Not for my photography, at least.
I feel like when I read it this morning, the megapixels is one of the things that jumped out to me, and I'm trying to think if there was anything else that was significantly different from the D700. Do you guys know if there was anything significant?
I didn't see anything else.
I know that the autofocus points are the same, and I think if I can remember correctly, the ISO capabilities were the same, I think. So yeah, it seems like that the megapixels is the big push.
Mute. I think it was a little different than the D700 on the
ISO.
On the ISO. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what
I'd have
it was.
to look that up again because I'm I shoot Canon, so I'm not as familiar with all the specs on these. But I feel like the D7.
No, you're right. It's the same.
Yeah, because I have capabilities up to 6400 in ISO with my 5D Mark II, and the D700 is the same.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same.
So that hasn't changed.
There's a couple of things, which is ISO starts at 100 on the D700 started at 200.
Oh.
So now you can go to 100, which just means that you can use a lower f-stop, let's say when you're using continuous light or something like that, without having to bump up the shutter speed, let's say for video purposes. And I think that's probably why they went with the 100. I wish they had 50 because people always need to put ND filters on the front end of the lenses because you're stuck at 60th of a second or 50th of a second, depends, shutter speed. And I mean, if you want to use f1.2 out in the sun, you can't be at like 50th of a second,
Yeah.
So you have to start putting ND filters on it. That's one difference, which isn't much, but it's a little different. Also, the exposure reading, I forgot, what was that? How it evaluates exposure, how
Right.
it meters exposure.
Right.
Exposure metering has, instead of like 1,050 dots, I think it has like 90-some thousand pixels that it reads off of for.
Yeah, it's 91,000 versus 1,005.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yep. And so
That's
that's
a really
kind
big
of
difference,
it will help. It will help with for the people who shoot in auto. I mean,
Right.
Well,
But
shoot-
that's talking about advanced scene recognition, not for exposure, is it?
Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's like
you're
you use a
looking at it
matrix.
right now, right?
Yeah, I'm looking. It
Yeah.
says advanced scene recognition system with 91,000 pixel metering sensor.
Yeah. See, if it's for metering, so it's for people
That-
who.
What that is talking about is if you're using matrix metering.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be full auto, just if you're using matrix metering. If you're using spot, who cares?
Who cares? Then you want the
Right.
dead center anyway.
Or
Stacy in chat just said, do people really buy $3,000 cameras and then shoot in auto? And the answer is, yes, ma'am, they do.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
they do.
Oh,
$3,000 point and shoot.
right.
They
I
probably
love
bought,
it.
like $8,000 cameras when the D3X came out and they were shooting in auto, but
Oh, wow. Well, it
And
should be
wait-
interesting to see how this all unfolds for sure.
We have somebody coming in.
Hello, Miss Sarah.
I'm sorry if I'm a mess. I've been working on Lightroom stuff all day. My eyes are burning.
I'm gonna move the focus to Sarah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh
So
God, don't do that. My eyes are like bleeding right now.
okay, Sarah. So we won't take up much of your time. When you're looking at your Google Hangout window, is there a chat to the left?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm gonna give you some numbers to pick from,
Oh, I put that away
and then once we get the number, I'll put the person's name in the chat
now. Okay.
so you can see it. And just want to tell everybody thank you for signing up. We had a lot of interest in this. A lot of people came in and signed up and followed our Facebook page and joined our group, and we have a lot of great new members in our group. That's very exciting. And the way I do this is, some people entered multiple times by doing multiple things. Each one gave you a different entry. I add all that up, make one big list, give random numbers so your name's all over the list, so you're not like all bunched up. You're all over the place. And then what we're going to do here is I got them all randomized, and I'm going to ask Sarah to pick a number between 1 and 223,
Oh, pressure.
and then whatever number she picks will be the winner. So between 1 and 223.
I always feel bad picking. That's why I like that random.org, so I don't feel guilty.
I've already done the random part. Now you got to do the actual part.
Let's do a number that like never gets hit. Why don't we do like number 1? Because that never happens. No one ever gets lucky enough. Once they enter, it's never like the first number.
Okay, so I'm putting the name in chat.
We'll do number 1. Why not? The first
Jeez.
number 1 never wins anything.
And let's see if that person is out here in the show. I don't see them. Oh, well. They still can win. We're not going to, you don't have to be here to win. But do you see the name of the person out there? Oh, of course there's 30 people here, so they could be here.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing chat. I just see Mike Howard. Hold on. I am not internet savvy at all, which is really sad.
And when you're looking at your the window where you see all of us, on the left side of the screen, there may be like some little lines. How do y'all see it, Kathleen?
Well, it depends if you close that out. I had the left side closed off, so
Yeah,
might have
if
to
you-
open it up.
If you move your mouse all the way to the left bracket of the window, there may be something that says expand meeting documents and meeting chat.
Okay, I see. Hang out with extras.
You know what I could do, Sarah? Do you have Skype open?
Am I popping up? Yeah, but I
Yes.
think is that.
There you go. Okay. I'll put the name back in there. Now you should see it again.
Okay. I think
Do you
I
see it?
recognize that actually. Yeah, I think she posts on my fan page quite a bit. That's exciting.
Yes. So do you want to go ahead and announce her name?
Okay, well, our winner is Amber Lancaster. Yeah, that does sound really familiar.
Yay,
Amber
congratulations to
Lancaster.
Amber.
Congratulations. And I guess you want me to send you her email address?
I would love that. I'll take good care of her.
Okay. So Amber, we'll post something in the Facebook group after this so everybody knows. I will I'll send you the email with her email, and then you can contact her and take it from there. And thank you so much, Sarah, for doing this.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah, real quick, didn't you just come out with a new action or line of actions?
We're doing presets. They're supposed to go live, I promised, by midnight, but my eyes are like eaten today. So
And that's why
it's really exciting. So we'll be looking out for that, and everybody should head on over to Sarah's
thank you.
Facebook wall and hold her to her midnight word.
I got all the presets and stuff. It's always the previews, like trying to get everything perfect and like packaged takes forever. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
getting there.
Well,
Updating all the web stuff that I'm not good at.
it seems to be really highly anticipated. There seems to be a lot of buzz about it. So congratulations, and we look forward to seeing it.
I'm really excited. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for having me back. I'll have to come back again sometime soon.
Yeah, when you have time.
Yes, please.
Good luck with the rest of the night.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful night.
Okay.
Hey,
Thank you.
See you later,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting for Amber. That's a huge prize that she just won. She just like hit the jackpot.
Yeah, and that works so much better when they can come in here into Google Plus rather than have to go out there.
Yeah, I agree.
And we had so many people sign up for that. That was really good. She sent me a message. So are we ready to move to the main topic?
I think so. For tonight's topic, there's been a lot of talk going on about focus. And so we decided that it would be best for us to try and discuss it on our show. And before we get started, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that, there's a lot of talk between name brand awareness and such. But for tonight, we just want to make sure that we're not doing any kind of name brand awareness. We just want to really keep it about the facts, really. There's a lot of people in here that shoot different cameras. Someone's shooting a Sony, and some people are shooting, Canon, and some people shoot Nikon even. But for tonight, we're just gonna put our name brands aside and just get down to the facts. We are not trying to start any kind of a name brand war of any means. We are certainly not promoting one name brand over another. And so tonight we don't want to get sidetracked. So before we get started, I just wanted to make sure that everyone out there in chat and everyone in here can just be, really mature about this topic and put name brands aside and make sure that we don't have any biases. Does everyone think that they can do that? Not really pull out name brands and not have any biases?
I know I can't. Oh, Kathleen. I have a question for you, Kathleen.
But
Is all that Canon gear going on eBay tomorrow when you buy your Nikon?
I haven't made a decision yet.
But you know how much of a victory it is for me that you're even thinking about it? The only thing I need to do now is get you off that crazy Mac phase.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
And get you to some real power. Just kidding.
Anyways, of course.
That was very good. That was very good.
I'm teasing. But we brought Dragos on the show because part of my journey has been, I have the Canon 5D Mark II, which has been highly rumored to have lots of focus issues. And so when I started talking through my issues that I felt like I was having, I wasn't having back focusing issues. I felt like I was just having soft focus. And so, I talked to the people that I trust, and there's a lot of people that I'm friends in the photography world, Dragos being one of them. And the great thing about him is he knows his stuff on the technical level. I tend to get caught up in all the hearsay and what people are saying. And so he was able to help me back up and understand focus for what the manufacturers meant it to be. And then, so that way you can understand how it's supposed to work for you and which cameras are supposed to work for you the way that you want to use them, and maybe that we're just using them incorrectly. So Dragos, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you being here. Before we let him jump in, I did want to quickly go over, there is 2 different types of autofocus systems. And the reason I thought this is important is for the people that are beginners that are truly using a typical point and shoot camera. The 2 different types are called active and passive focus. And an active autofocus shoots an infrared beam at the subject, and then the beam bounces back to the camera, and it figures out the distance between the camera and the subject, and then the camera will instinctively focus the lens based on the information. The good for that is you can use it in poorly lit environments. It always seems funny to me that those little point and shoot cameras are great in like a low lit restaurant when you're getting a quick snapshot of a group of your friends. But the bad thing is they're only good for stationary subjects. So all the moms out there that have the little point and shoot cameras and their main complaint is, I cannot catch my child when they're running across the yard. Well, it's because of your autofocus system. It was not intended for that use. It has an infrared beam that shoots out, bounces back, and you have to have a still subject in order for it to take an accurate reading. The other kind, actually on speed lights, however, on your speed light, there is a AF assist function that is an active autofocus function. It has the infrared that goes out and shoots back, and it assists the camera, but it's not like the end-all be-all as far as focusing is concerned. But on the front of your camera, the autofocus assist lamp is not an infrared beam. So that's different. Your cameras, our DSLR cameras, tend to rely on the passive system, and the difference for that is the passive system uses sensors within your camera, and it detects the contrast from either the light that's bouncing off of your subject or the contrast of the subject itself. And so, that it's more accurate, and that's why DSLRs use it. And that's kind of when I wanted to bring Dragos in, because understanding the 2 different kinds is good to know that cameras do have certain limitations. You can't buy any camera and expect it to do exactly what you want it to do. And so it's good to understand the focus at kind of the base level.
And before we go to Dragos, I want to say something too, is that I think that, and he can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think in general, Nikon is thought to have the stronger focus, especially as the light gets lower, the difference becomes more and more. But that being said, the majority of focus issues is usually a user issue rather than a camera issue. You can have individual cameras have focus issues, or maybe even the lens. Maybe the lens is what needs to be adjusted, but often the focus issue is the user not doing something right. What did I say wrong there, Dragos?
Nothing. Nothing. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it. Yeah, I mean, that's. Do you want to say anything else?
Nope, I'm good. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, it is usually the user. I mean, Canon wouldn't come out with something that, this works, and then here you go, and then you have so many people, shooting with Canon, and they don't see any problem with it. I've had a Canon before. I had a XTI. That's what I kind of started shooting. That was my first DSLR. And I was having a focus issue when I was shooting at like f1.8. I wasn't using, I wasn't using the right focus points, the one that were cross type, and I'll get into that. I was using the 1.8 millimeter 50, which its focus inside the motor is not, very precise, and it was hunting because I'd be at a spot where, like, shooting really close, where it was kind of in between. So all I had to do is like back up a couple of millimeters, and then it would be able to hit that focus point, you know, because the motor wasn't programmed to even go to that spot as a focusing point. So then I was like, oh man, I hate Canon. So then I went to Nikon. And, you know, but, you know, was it the camera's fault? I mean, yeah, okay, I paid $110 for a lens, you know, and then it was like $500 for a body. So, you know, I guess it could be the equipment, but I was using cheap equipment. And I was trying to get the most out of it, and I was pushing its limits. So now a lot of people, let's see if anybody's saying anything. Okay, the way focus points work is, let's say the 5D Mark II. It has 9 focus points, and only the center one is a cross type. Cross type meaning that it will focus contrast. It will pick up contrast horizontally and vertically. So let's say you have a line that's going horizontal. I'm not sure which way it picks up on the 5D Mark IIs or on most Canons. Okay, all right. I'm not sure which way, if it's horizontally or vertically, which way it picks up. But let's say it was vertically, and you had a horizontal line going through one of the other sensors, one of the other focus point sensors, and you know, you would try to focus on it. Well, it wouldn't be able to, because it's not meant to. I mean, you would, you know, what's the chance of only having a line going through a point, you know? But, you know, let's say you are trying to push it to that limit, it won't, you know, it will try to focus and it won't be able to, at least not accurately.
So what you're saying is that different cameras have a certain number of autofocus points, and to back up for the people out there that are just starting, those are the dots that are the inside of your camera, right. And you can select to have them all lit up, which means that everything should be in focus, technically, or you can select which autofocus point you'd like to use, and most of the points are either vertical or horizontal, and not both, but specifically on the 5D Mark II, there's one that is called a crosshair, basically, and it's the center one, and it makes a cross, and so it's horizontal and vertical. So your center autofocus point is going to be the most accurate autofocus point that you have on that specific camera.
Yep. I thought some of them use contrast as a way to focus.
Well,
yeah, that's the passive system. It does, but if your contrast. Okay, so for example, I shoot newborns, and so they're laying down, and their faces have very, very, very smooth skin, so it's low contrast. Yeah. And where I get my contrast is usually right on the eyelid. And my favorite autofocus point to use is, if I'm in portrait mode, it's kind of up here in the top right. And so because that top right autofocus point is not a crosshair, if I'm not focusing it on something with great contrast, I can easily miss focus. And so I have to either select my middle autofocus point all the time, because that's the most consistent one, and then reframe my shot, or take a chance that it's not going to be as crisp and sharp as I want it to be.
Yeah, and when I used to shoot a lot of soccer, even though I'm using the center one maybe, what would happen is I get the edge of the sensor off of the kid, and something behind them would have greater contrast, or you know, the autofocus will pick it up greater, and bam, it'd connect to that thing behind them.
Well, that definitely happened to me as well, and I wound up switching this past fall when taking soccer shots into manual focusing to ensure I was getting what I wanted to get, which was usually my son as a goalie. Because when he's in the goal, a lot of people were cutting across the screen on you, and then the camera would hunt and peck until it got somebody that I didn't want.
Goalie is a little bit easier. I can't do it up and down the field.
About the Canon 5D Mark II, even though that there are 9 autofocus points, there are an additional 6 autofocus points that are not visual to the photographer's eye. that the camera uses to help assist the 9 focus points that you can choose. And 2 of the 6 are additional crosshairs. So technically, the 5D Mark II does have 3 focus points that are crosshairs, but the only one that the photographer has control over is the one that's dead center of your camera, which really knocks out rule of thirds when you're trying to compose in that way, unless you want to focus and then recompose your shot.
But that's when you run into the problem of when you're shooting that close, any kind of little change is gonna, matter. You're shooting at f1.2, let's say, with the 50, and you're getting into its, let's say, minimum, the closest focus that it can focus on, and it's not going to be as accurate because the way the lens is shaped and the way light travels, if you're going to focus right here and you move, you'll probably be out of focus slightly. And then it's like, oh, it's my camera. Well, it's not. It is, but it's not.
Right. And it's not that you have a bum camera in that sense. It's just that camera was not specifically manufactured to be used like that.
Right.
Any lens that you buy, they tell you there's a sweet spot, and it's rarely ever, probably never, at either the very top or the very bottom of the aperture.
Right, and same thing with zoom, that's why, zoom lenses aren't the sharpest, compared to primes, because they're trying to build in all these lenses and make them sharp at, 70 millimeter and 200, It's always going to be the sharpest in the middle because, that's why you don't get like the, 18 to 200 is not the sharpest lens, because especially at 18 or 200.
Right.
But it does the job for regular people. And that's why, even, like most photographers that, make money from photography will get just a whole bunch of primes. Yeah, it takes longer, and it's more of a hassle. They'll have to have like 2 bodies, one with, let's say, a 50 and one with like a 200 f2 or something. But, you get the sharpest images.
Jennifer Deming out in chat asks, so Kathleen, do you use the center crosshair, then recompose for your newborn shots, or do you take a chance that the focus might be off? I have been using not the center. I rarely ever use the center, and this whole crosshair thing is completely new information to me as of this week. So I was just walking around not understanding why I was missing focus. And once again, I want to say, in my case, it's not the camera's fault. It's that I wasn't using the camera the way it was intended to be used. Now, there are other cameras that have more crosshairs than the Canon 5D Mark II. And so that's why, for my photography purposes, the way that I shoot is wide open. And wide open means that I like to use the widest aperture, not always the widest, but really, really wide apertures so I can get a very shallow depth of field. It's just the way that I like to shoot. I like the way my images look like that. And so the Canon 5D Mark II is a great camera, but for my purposes, with the center autofocus point being the only one with a crosshair, and me not liking to compose my images that way, I'm finding some limitations there, and so I'm not sure where my next move is, if there is going to be a next move. I'm still kind of working my way through it personally.
Does your Canon have a back button focus? I don't know if y'all can see that.
It does, but I've never been real successful with that back focus
button. Can't really see it very good. Mm-hmm. And I've gone to that exclusively. It does take some getting used to using that. So yours does have that, because that'll allow you to focus on one spot and then move. But I think Dragos was kind of hitting on it. When you focus, you're focusing on a plane. And if you turn your camera, you've changed the plane of focus.
Right, and then add into that a really shallow depth of field. I mean,
well, that's the thing.
How great that autofocus I can't say it. Compositing is going to help me with shooting such low, shallow depth of field.
True. If you're shooting with f8, you've got, you can't see my hands here, but you've got a wide. Let's look at my hands in here. A wide range and focus. So when you turn your camera a little bit, it still stays in focus. But if you've got a really shallow depth of field, as you turn your camera, now maybe the spot you wanted to focus is out of focus because you've moved outside of that focus range. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I've noticed that if I'm doing like an outdoor maternity session and I want to lock focus and then recompose my shot, those tend to work out great. But not when
Right, because you're far away, right?
I'm much further away.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
That's
if
the other
I'm
thing that
real
affects-
close up on a newborn, and that's what I do, I shoot newborns mainly. So
Yeah.
for my purposes, I'm not trying to ditch the camera and say it's a bad camera. It's a great camera, and it's served me for almost, I think I've had it almost for 4 years now. So, I'm just trying to figure out what's going to work best for my style of photography.
And Dragos, correct me here again if I'm wrong, but I think I'm thinking of it. There's 3 things that affect depth of field, maybe more. Your distance to the subject, your focal length of the lens, and your f-stop.
Yep.
And maybe the crop of the sensor too. I don't know how much that plays into it.
Well, I mean, I think they're just like those 3 things. If you were to compare, the size of the sensor. But let's say compare apple to apple size, size-wise.
Yeah.
Those 3 things. I mean, and then the bigger the sensor, and mainly because, like, some people it's like, oh, the sensor size has nothing to do with depth of field, or how shallow your depth of field is. Well, it does, because there's one of those factors that has to change when you have a bigger sensor.
Yeah.
One of those 3 factors: distance, what's it called? The focal length, the millimeters or whatever, and f-stop. Not necessarily f-stop. So the other 2 things. Let's say you're shooting crop sensor and you're at 5 feet. Well, and then you're at f2.8, zoomed in at 200 millimeters. Well, you go full frame at the same distance at 200 millimeters, f2.8. Well, same distance, you're going to have a wider image. So now there's something that's going to have to change to get you to that same exact image with, like, let's say, portrait, or whatever, headshot. If you want that same headshot, well, now you're right here. You're getting this right here. Well, you're going to have to get closer or get a 70-300 and zoom in at 300 to get that, to get that close again. So now, being at 300 millimeters, same distance, well, your background just got blurrier because now you're at 300 and not 200.
Yeah,
But
and I think you can see some of that with a point and shoot or your phone, that the depth of field is not real shallow. It's really
endless.
wide. It's almost endless, and that's because of that teeny weeny little bitty sensor that's inside of there.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody let me borrow a Canon video camera. I took I think it was like an 18 to 70 millimeter lens or something like that. It was a Canon video camera. Well, I just took it off and I tried it on my camera. I mean, at 18 millimeters, it seemed like I was at 100 millimeters. And at that 80 millimeters, I must have been at 500 millimeters. I mean, something about 40 feet away, I was getting a close-up of it because the size sensor and, that sensor was a quarter of an inch or, 1/3 cc or whatever it was, CCD or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the millimeter setting didn't match up to 35 millimeter camera, which is what we're used to seeing.
Right. Well, in my case, mine was still crop frame, but nowhere near as cropped as. Yeah.
Dragos, can you talk to us about matrix metering, center or spot? And BB out in chat asked, which would you suggest for running toddlers?
Running toddlers.
And I don't think any of those are focus, are they? They're all exposure.
Right. Yeah, that's all to figure out how you're basing your exposure off of, and not necessarily about focus. But for a running toddler, exposure, this is off topic, but exposure is important because you want your exposure to track that toddler. I keep mine on spot, but
The
that's just what I'm
exposure
comfortable with.
exposure is a little tricky. Like I try to shoot in manual all the time, and that's because I've tried auto, and it's you kind of have to shoot on auto all the time to learn how auto even works. You know.
Well,
and
shooting on auto is what shows you you have to shoot on auto to learn what the camera does, so you can see how it's holding you back. And then when you find that you want to do something the camera's not going to do in auto, that's when you jump out and you start learning how to do it yourself in manual.
Well,
You
right,
can
but
put
let's say you shoot, let's say you're running toddlers all the time. Or let's say with a kid, you know, if you're shooting your kid all the time, you kind of know what his skin is like. And if I would always use spot metering and just, you know, because you're always going to focus on his face or on his eye, you know. And if you're always focusing in the same spot, you're going to see if your images are always underexposed or overexposed. Most skin is actually around gray anyways, around 18% gray, so it should come out right. But let's say your kid's a little you know, lighter skin than normal or darker skin than normal, then, you know, it's like, okay, well, when I shoot my kid, I need to be like 1/3 f-stop, like plus EV, you know?
Right.
And, but I would always use spot because if you use, what if he's on a black rug?
Right.
Or if he's on a white rug, then your images are going to come out either too dark or too bright.
Yeah, I'm with you. I use spot metering all the time.
Yeah.
And Scott just posted a really nice thing he uses when he's teaching about depth of field. I'm going to try and bring up here. Second, let's see.
While you're bringing that up, I'll throw this out there for everybody. So you might want to get a pen and paper because this is pretty cool information that I had my assistant help look up for me. The 5D Mark II has 9 autofocus points and 6 autofocus assist points that the photographer can't see, and 3 of them all together will be crosshair points, only the center one being the one that the photographer has control out of. The Canon 1D Mark IV has 45 autofocus points. I'm not sure how many of those are crosshairs. I couldn't find that info. The Nikon D700 has 51 autofocus points, and so does the D800. And for the D800, out of the 51 autofocus points, 15 of them are cross points. So that's pretty awesome. 15. And the D3 has 51 autofocus points. I could not find how many of those were cross points, but I would assume that it would probably be close to the D800, if not better.
What's that say?
Oh, hey, hold on. I got something for you, Mike.
Nikon. Yes, sir.
You know, since you wanted to show off the Nikon thing, the 7D has 19 autofocus points, and all 19 are cross type.
Oh, wow. At some point, you just don't need them anymore. That's just overkill.
Except when you're shooting at f2.8,
yeah,
only the center one is.
Okay.
And I'm guessing anything below f2.8 is going to be only the center one.
Hey, Kathleen, where are you getting all this detailed information?
I have an assistant.
Yeah, but you have an assistant, and you do deep research by going to Canon's manufacturing location and getting it from their engineers, right?
Yeah, we just looked all over the internet, basically typed in, you know, how many autofocus points per, you know, camera, whatever.
So your assistant is named Google?
Scott Green.
Scott Green gave you all this information. Awesome. So are you reading this from something you wrote down, or do you have a website? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm reading it from what I wrote down. Sorry.
Sorry, David. If I had a website I could send you to, I'd send you there. And Scott did post something here, and what it's showing is the 3 things we were talking about is your f-stop. And at first, this is one of those things I think when you look at something, you ask, what do you see? And I'm always the last person to see it. You go, oh, it's a woman's face. I didn't see it. So it took me a second to see it. And if anybody else didn't see this, what it's showing is that f2, this little darker grayed in area is the area that's in focus. At f8, you got a lot more. At f22, you have a whole lot more. So that's the f-stop. Then when you're looking at the distance to the subject, at 5 feet, you have a little bitty tiny spot in focus. 10 feet you have more, and 15 feet you have more. The further you go back, the more that depth of field that's in focus is. And then also this shows how the millimeter, the zoom of the lens affects it. You know, the more it's zoomed in, the smaller the area that's in focus. Does that all make sense to you guys?
Yeah, that's
So-
really useful.
That's why
Yeah.
those nice long telephoto lenses they use at sports games, a 300 f2.8 has nothing but the baseball player in focus.
Yeah, and they do have, so they're combining a long lens with probably a good amount of distance too. So
Right.
the camera-
They have all three of them.
yeah, but still, it makes it challenging. It's a great post there. Thanks, Scott.
It's in the
Yeah,
show
that's
notes.
really useful. I'm going to pull that back out and look at it again.
Yeah, I added it to the show notes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, very cool. I mean,
And let's cover the other aspect of, like, okay, let's go through yours first. When you posted those pictures of the ruler, remember, Kat,
Right.
on Facebook, and you want to explain to anybody who hasn't seen it what you posted?
yeah, what I
Yeah.
did, I tried to do some focusing tests on my camera to see if I felt like I was having focusing issues. And after spending an hour on the internet searching out all the different types of focusing tests, including the one that Mike sent me, I walked away more confused than ever. So
Sorry.
I just took a yardstick and I put it at a 45-degree angle, and I used all of my different autofocus points at different times and then shot each number individually to see how it was in focus. And then I posted those images online, and the consensus was that I wasn't missing focus, but I was still experiencing what I was calling soft focus, which, come to find out, was not my camera's issue, it was my issue, because my favorite autofocus point is not the center one, and I like to shoot at very shallow depth of fields. So now that I know that, I can either change the way and style that I shoot so my camera will work for me the way that it's been intended to.
What ISO was that at? Do you remember?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to say it was 400, and I didn't move my ISO, and I left it at, I was using my 50 millimeter, so I was at 1.4, because all of the websites that I read in that hour all said that you should be at the widest capability of your lens when doing a test.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's also a limit, and I just found this out. There's also a limit on where you should be distance-wise.
Right.
Right.
And the whole, when it comes to AF tune, and I have a list right here of the cameras that have.
What I read is that you're supposed to get as close as you can without it hunting. So the test that I read said get as close as you can to your subject with it locking focus and then snap it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I saw was you have to be with any lens other than anything over 200. Basically, any lens be at 50 times the length of your lens. Let's say you have a 50 millimeter lens, or let's say you have a 50 millimeter lens. So 50 times 50 equals 2,500 or whatever it is millimeters.
Okay.
And then put the focusing, whatever you're supposed to focus on, at that distance, and then try to focus, and then do the whole micro adjustments, focus adjustments in camera.
Right.
There are, dang it, I just lost the list.
And just want to remind everybody, we're coming up on the hour, so watch your Google thing. Sometimes it tries to kick you out. It will ask you, "Are you still here?"
Okay.
Just make sure you click that if it comes up.
Okay. So then you just go into your micro adjustments and you adjust from there. But there is, and anything over 200 millimeters, you're supposed to be at 25 times the distance of your focal length. So let's say you zoom in at 200 millimeters, you're supposed to be at 200 times 25 millimeters, the distance away from your I'm not sure if it's from the lens or from the sensor itself, but I mean roughly. I mean that's pretty close. But that's where you're supposed to do your AF fine tuning at. So anything under 200 millimeters, 50 times the focal length of your lens away, and then anything over 200 at 25 times the focal length of your lens away.
Okay, well that's good. That's good to know.
And yeah, so about the ruler thing, you were saying, why is my camera out of focus, or why is my lens out of focus? And I was looking at it, and I'm like, what are you talking about? You're saying that you focused on number 12, and you were focused on number 12. I mean, because you could. I mean, sure, it was soft, but that's because of you were shooting at f1.4. So
right.
That's. Your lens wasn't out of focus, your camera wasn't out of focus. It was in focus, it was just slightly soft because you're shooting at f1.4.
This is a little known fact, Kathleen, that even if you have an f1.4 lens, if you own a Nikon, you can actually shoot that lens at f1.2. I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
I was gonna say, that's really little known.
Yeah,
I know, I'm like, what?
I'm kidding. But, yeah, if you're at the wide open, it's going to be a little soft even when it is in focus.
Well, and this is something that I will not find out until I get to go someday, fingers crossed. But the two girls that I follow and have been following since I fell in love with newborn photography is the Baby As Art team out in San Diego. And, I read their blog and, I look at their stuff all the time, and I know that they shoot with really high ISOs, all natural light at, 1.4 for most of their shots, and not a thing looks soft in the least bit. And so, they are shooting Nikons, and I'm shooting a Canon, and so, I don't want to say it's a name brand thing, but now that I know that, there's 15 cross points on the Nikon that I'm interested in, and only one that I can control on my Canon, it kind of makes me think that my camera is limiting me from the style of photography that I like to do.
As much as I'd like to, say switch over to Nikon and give you trouble on that, I would find out a little more about how they're doing that before I would assume it's the Canon.
Right. Where are you looking at their images? Like on the back of the camera or at the actual raw file?
No, just online. Just online. So, yeah, you're right. There could be a lot of sharpening going on.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, that's very true.
I mean, even in camera, you're looking at the back of somebody's, camera, and, I mean, they could have their sharpness all the way up. It's like, oh, man, that's sharp.
It'll be a while, so don't hold your breath before I can find out how they're doing it and, how they're being successful at it, because their workshop is $2,700.
Oh, moly.
So I'm starting a fund if anybody would like to contribute.
Yeah, really.
Now, I think some of the best ways to get really sharp lenses, of course, is focus, but not sharp images. The lens could come into play, too. I mean, having a really good quality lens can impact your sharpness, too.
Right, and a lot of people say even the 1.4. Like I've heard Nikon people say, "Oh, get the 1.4 over the 1.8. It's well worth the money because it's sharper." And then there's people that are like, "Well, even if you get the 1.4, you still want to shoot at f1.8 because it's not as sharp as 1.4." I mean,
true, that's true. But if you get the 1.4 and the 1.8 and shoot them both at 1.8. The 1.4 should be sharper at 1.8 than the 1.8.
And it probably will be, but that's just like a Canon versus Nikon. That's like Nikon versus Nikon. It's whoever is more of a pixel peeper, I'm guessing, and
there's something else that you could be, you may not be thinking about, Kathleen, is that if they're shooting at ISO 100 and you're shooting at ISO 1000, the higher you go up in ISO, even with these better cameras, it does start to deteriorate the sharpness.
Right. Right. Well, and then today I had a session this morning, and Dragos and David at D&D Photography, they lent me one of their Alien Bees.
He's got the sign behind him.
Studio D&D, come on now.
Studio D&D.
Yeah, Studio D&D, sorry.
You're fired.
And that was
I'm
my
hired.
first experience shooting with artificial light or studio light, I guess I should say, during a session.
And
I
that's
was
even
really
flash,
nervous
which is harder, you know.
Yeah, I was really nervous to step outside of my comfort zone, but I actually really enjoyed it. I haven't been able to look through all of the images. I have pulled up a couple. They're not edited, but if you want me, I can share my screen and show you a straight out of camera image. But it's just a different feel, and I did like having control over my light, even though I'm not, technically proficient on how to control it yet because it was my first time using that kind of lighting. But anyways, it's a new avenue, and it's something it was really nice to be able to shoot at like a 100 or 200 ISO. I mean, I've never been able to do that during a newborn session. Never not once, ever.
And that's another thing. It's like, okay, well, if you're shooting at ISO, let's say 6400 at weddings,
Mm-hmm.
well, oh, why are my images out of focus? Well, okay, so, you're shooting at ISO 6400. Well, it's not going to be very sharp. Well, I mean, it could be, depending on what camera you have and how it handles ISO 6400.
Right, but it's not about focus or in focus. It's about the grain and the noise that's introduced into your image at that point. So that's the softness that you're seeing.
Right, it's just a lot of grain at 6400 if you're shooting with like a T2I or something, or some Rebel.
Right, right.
So that's why, like, oh, why does this point and shoot have 30 megapixels when my DSLR has 10? Well, yeah, go ahead and shoot a wedding with a point and shoot without flash. Good luck with that. It's just you can't. So why are the $5,000 cameras $5,000? Because they have a lot of technology in them, So, and yeah, ISO is one big thing, how your camera handles ISO.
Yeah, something we haven't talked about with focus is the different focus methods. We talked about the sensors and everything on there. On my D2X, so mine's a little old. I don't know, maybe y'all's are a little different. But I have the single where you use in one spot. I have it where you can use dynamic, where I'm supposed to kind of follow the person. If they move outside of one spot, another spot picks it up. And then I have group, so I can have like a line like this, or group certain ones together. Or then I have one that picks it up based upon. Whoop, Kathleen did not hit the "I'm still here" button, and she just dropped out.
Where does that come up, anyways?
It'll come up like in the middle of your screen.
Yeah, right over the main picture that keeps switching.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she was here before I was, so.
Yeah.
But I was here before her, too, and that didn't come up on me.
Yeah, we were both here before her. I don't know what happened. Anyway, the last one I have, and I've never really found a great use for this, is where it picks up the closest subject. I don't know. Does y'all's cameras have those?
I had more of a back focus problem where it captures something behind it.
No, I have a focus method that's called closest subject priority.
I think my new camera has something according to that, but I have to look at it.
So, Dragos, are you familiar with any of those methods?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the closest one, it's if you have a lot of things move in the background or whatever. I mean, having that would probably be pretty good. I just use 1-point focus, like single point focus, and I usually use, unless it's sports, which you would want to use like continuous. I just use one focus point, and I use the locking one, the one that beeps, and as soon as it's focused, it will lock on that focus, and then you can shoot.
Yeah. So here's the actual ones for my camera: the single autofocus, the dynamic, the group, and the dynamic with the closest subject. So you would say that if you're shooting sports, and that's what I found too. When I'm shooting sports, the single is the fastest.
Right, and that's another thing. Like, I know Nikon's, and I think Canons have too, where you can choose less focus points.
Yeah.
So then it's easier for it to calculate if you do want to use multiple points. It doesn't have to like try to figure out, go through all the focus points and figure out which one it needs to use. It has less focus points, and that's when it's going to be the fastest. when you, instead of using, let's say on the Nikon, the 51, they say use the 11 focus, 11 point, or 17. I think it's 11 point, which then it can focus a lot quicker because it doesn't have to like try to calculate for all the other ones as well.
Yeah.
That's if I use that. I just use one single focus point all the time, and if I would use the continuous one. Let's say when a bride is walking down the aisle towards me and I'm standing still, and I just have to keep that focus point on their face, and as they're walking towards me, it will continuously keep that subject in focus.
And I think the ones I showed can be used in combination with the way you're talking about. You're talking about whether it's single focus or continuous focus.
Right.
And so the ones I just showed are even different from that. Because I shoot a lot of sports, I'm almost always in continuous.
See, I don't think that Canon even has those options, to be honest with you. If they do, I've never seen them before. Out of the box, when I got my Canon 5D Mark II, I was disappointed as to how they had the 9 autofocus points laid out. I felt like they were all too clustered towards the center. That's still a problem with me when I'm trying to shoot in portrait of a toddler. I feel like I have to, I always use 1 point, so I feel like I have to lock focus and then recompose, or I'm going to be cutting their feet off in the picture when they're sitting down. And of course I could back up, but then I wouldn't be getting the facial expressions and the closeness that I like to have with my subjects. And then something else different that I read between the Nikons and the Canons is that the Nikons, they have facial detection. So it will detect the person's face, where the Canon will just focus on the closest thing to the lens. So if you're a portrait photographer, that would make a big difference, I think.
My Nikon doesn't have that.
It doesn't.
But it's old.
Yeah, I think that was the D800, I think, that had the facial detection.
The face detect. Yeah, they have that for, I think, I'm not sure if it works on video. I know they have a lot of that for
video,
when in live view mode or for video.
I know my wife's point and shoot has that facial recognition thing where it will focus in on the face.
And yeah. I know my new camera will have that where I can assign 6 different faces to it. So like I'll put my son's face, my wife's face, and when it sees any of those faces come in there, it will automatically try to focus on that one.
Really?
That is crazy.
That is crazy.
So that I like.
But that's when it uses the live view mode, right? It actually uses the sensor.
Well, it's using the I mean, it's the sensor is passing straight through, so it's always using the sensor. It doesn't have to wait for the mirror to flap up.
Right. Yeah. Because like when you're doing regular focusing on cameras that don't have that option when you're not in live view mode. So basically, when the mirror is down and you're looking through the lens and through the eyepiece. Wait, is the Sony?
It's got the translucent mirror, so it's constant focus. So
I see, right. That's what I was either thinking that or the eyepiece actually has another little screen in it because some cameras have that.
My eyepiece is actually another monitor in there. It's not a.
Oh, so it is, right.
Right. It's no longer a. It's not optical glass for that.
Right. So then they can actually use, more like a video camera type of focusing point, because regular focusing screens, which actually go, let's say, here, I got my camera. Usually there is, the sensor is like right here and it's flat like this. And then there's a mirror right in front of it at 45-degree angle. Well, right up here, right below the eyepiece, there. Why are you laughing at me?
No, Mike, he's showing up his Nikon.
Oh, well, hold on. Oh, yeah, Canon, look.
Yeah.
What's that black lens doing on a Canon?
Hold on, look.
I've never seen a black lens on a Canon.
Nikon.
You got both.
See, I am not, when you guys are showing off all your Canon stuff, I use whatever works.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the smart move.
I do it because it's fun to mess with people,
right.
but
I know. I would have pulled stuff out, but I hate the Canon straps and I hate the Nikon straps, so I don't have a strap on this one because I was shooting video with it, and that's why I got the Canon for video. And then I have another strap for the Nikon, so I had nothing around here to show off. So the focus screen is right here, and it's got those little red focus points that you see when you look through the eyepiece. Well, the Sony doesn't have that. It actually has a little monitor up here, and it reads right off of the. It can focus off the screen, like live mode or just regular. And I'm not sure does it have like regular focus spots as well, because it can, since they're translucent. You can easily
mine's
do
got
that.
19 spots, and I think 15 of them are crosshair.
Right. So it does have a regular focus, and it has. I mean, Sony's been making video cameras forever, so they can definitely do that. And Canon has to. I don't even know why they haven't used that technology yet that they use in their regular cameras. I mean,
Right.
But where was I going with this?
Well, I mean, I'm honestly waiting around for Mac to come out with a camera, because everything they do is superior.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
kidding
You got your iPhone, and that's it.
It's going to crash like every 5 minutes.
Oh, come on.
All I hear about is iPhone this for cameras. There's Android phones out there with just as good or better cameras in it.
I don't know
As long
about
as
that.
you
My
have
camera
Instagram,
stinks on
you're
my
all
phone.
good.
I don't know, get a Galaxy S2 and I'll put a Galaxy S2 up against any iPhone.
Yeah.
But they're all going to have. None of them are going to compete against an SLR.
Oh,
Absolutely. No.
No.
Definitely not.
And what's sad is I take the majority of the pictures of my kids with my iPhone.
Well, that's because it's so easy,
It's so
Right, you always have it with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It is because it's not going to compete with your SLR doesn't mean you don't use it. You're
Right.
still going to use it.
Yeah.
What is it, Chase Jarvis? The best camera is the one that you have with you?
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Um,
So we're coming up on. We're over an hour here. Do y'all have any other specific topic you wanted us to get to, Dragos?
well, I did want to mention the best way to. Another reason that people get out of focus images is they use the multiple focus points, and they're just hoping that focus, the person's going to come into focus, and they get images that don't come into focus, and they're like, well, why wasn't the person in focus? Well, probably because if you had, I know I'm going to say this, but if you had, let's say, a Canon, which only has 11 points of focus, and out of the whole screen right here, and if that person's kind of far away, let's say they're a little skinny person right here, and they're like right here, right where my hand is, and they're sitting kind of sideways, well, your focus point is going to be like, let's say they're sitting here, your focus point is going to be over here, over there, up here, one in the center, and this guy is right between the two focus points, which are right here.
Right.
Well, they're not going to come into focus.
Right.
It's going to focus on the background, and then, that's why I always use one. So let's say you use one, you kind of, you use, let's say, this one over here. Well, you recompose, you move the guy right here, you focus, and then just recompose, and then take the shot, and then they'll be in focus. A lot of people, they use all of the points, and they're hoping that they can get in focus. Well, they're not going to get in focus if they're not on a focus point.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure if those 3 focus points, let's say on the 5D Mark II, will actually focus even if one of the focus points isn't on the person. Do you know?
The 5D Mark II is not going to track faces, if that's what you're asking.
No, like those 3 focus points that the photographer can't see.
Oh, right.
Invisible.
Yeah, no, those are just to assist, is what I read. It's not the primary focus point. It's just to assist and I think bring other things into focus.
Okay.
But not the primary focus.
Right. And, that's why a lot of people, Nikon, because, it has 51 focus points. In my case, does it matter? It matters a little bit because I don't have to recompose as much. So let's say if I'm really, really close to the subject, that recomposition of the subject might not make my 1.2 millimeter 85 1.2 millimeter fall out of focus when I'm recomposing, because of the distance. because still have all these. I have, let's say on a 700. Right now, I only have 39 on the 7000, and they're not all cross type, so I know that. And sometimes even Nikon, if you're not going to use a cross type, I mean, you could be slightly out of focus.
And the Nikon, does it tell you which ones are the cross types on the Nikon as well? Because they tell you the center for the Canon 5D Mark II.
I haven't even looked at my camera which ones, because I don't have that problem really.
Yeah.
Because I'm only using one, and
okay, but this is why I have the problem, because I only use one too. One as well.
Right.
But because I shoot newborns whose eyes are closed and my only focus point is a thin line where their eyelashes are.
Right.
If I am using an autofocus point that is not both horizontal and vertical, let's say that it's vertical and my baby is laying down and so his eyelash is running vertical and then it can't find the focus.
Right.
Or let's say I'm shooting in portrait and then it can't find the focus this way.
Right.
If I have more crosshair type points and I know which ones they are and it's not just my center point, then I can use any of those 15 crosshair points to make sure that I have locked focus on that little baby's thin little itty bitty line on their lid and get a really sharp focus.
Right.
That's just my thought process.
There's a good chance that if you go on Google and you Google your 5D Mark II cross type sensors, in your case it's just one, but let's say one that has more focus points
right.
and more cross type, there's a good chance you'll find out which ones they are.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even read the books.
Right. I mean, because I know for me, how you're pointing out, your top one's here. I can't do this. I'm
right,
going
yeah,
backwards. All the way across. I know which ones that I use every single time. It's the ones
right,
that you just get comfortable with.
The one right here.
Yeah, exactly.
There,
exactly.
These right here.
Yep,
the one
the
right
ones
in
on
the
the
middle.
end. Which, in my camera, none of those are crosshair points. And so, that's not the problem, but I feel like it's aiding. It's not helping. It's
Right.
not helping me.
Right.
It's not a problem. It's just not helping me any. So.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
I think my owner's manual told me says which one
most likely the owner
D2X says it.
manual is going to tell you, because the owner manual is for beginners and for high-end people that need to know which focus points are cross-type and which aren't.
Right.
And yeah, most people don't read. I mean, have I read the user manual on my camera? No. I mean, I'm a guy, so
Yeah.
we know everything. but I'm pretty good at figuring things out, and if I don't know how to use something, I'll either look it up in the manual or I'll YouTube it, and then I find out.
That's how I read my manuals when I go back to it when I need to find something
Before
else.
anybody switches, doing your homework is the most important thing.
Yes, I agree.
People are just like, oh, get this because it's better. Well, and then they get it and they still use, multiple focus points, and then, like I was saying, let me just get back to that. Like I was saying before, Nikon is a little easier if you're using multiple focus points, because let's say on a crop sensor that has 51, like I had the D300 and the D300S, 51 focus points go from here to here,
Right.
from here to here.
It's basically every inch of your,
Right. So if you use all the focus points and you use the ones like you said, Mike, where you can use the closest subject.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always gonna have that subject in focus, because even if it's let's say a little bit further away, unless of course let's say you're shooting a bird, like I was telling you, Kat.
Mm-hmm.
You should have. Let's say you're shooting wildlife and you're shooting birds, and not literally but with camera.
Yeah.
If there's a bird in the sky, for me, I think that a Nikon would be better. Then you put it on all those multiple focus points.
it's gonna get it.
You put it on tracking, and it's gonna get it, because that bird is always gonna be on a focus point. Now. Full frames, full frame cameras like the D700, the focus points don't go all the way across.
Okay.
Like on the crop frame, I think it uses the same exact focus points, except the
full frame
screen that they're on is bigger.
Right.
So they actually go from like here to here and to about, here or so.
Yeah.
Which still, I mean, it's you can focus on things like that, like a small bird, a lot easier because it's always going to be on a focus point unless it's like out here, who has a, who's going to
compose that way, right?
That way. With a Canon, for something like that, it's going to be a little harder, because you're trying to focus, and as soon as your thing is hunting, you could have missed that shot.
Right, because there's only 9 focus points.
Yeah, until that bird goes through a focus point, and hopefully your focus point, your focus is not, your lens is not like way out of focus, where it won't even see that, oh, there's something there, and then the bird, already flew out of that focus point, and that's when you want more focus points. But unless it's like that, I mean, I use one focus point all the time, and, do I have a problem focusing? No. I've shot with Canon. Now, yeah, with that 50mm 1.8, it was the lens. It wasn't as precise. All I had to do was back up half an inch, and then it would get to a spot where you can actually focus. Because like I'd be in a spot where that lens, the motor, just was not meant to be there. So it would, okay, well, it's not focused here, it's not focused here, and then it kept on hunting.
Yeah.
All I have to do is back up or get a little closer, and it would focus just fine.
It's all about knowing the cameras and, being aware that no camera is free from limitations. They all have something. And so it's just kind of like, picking which one's going to work best for the kind of photography that you do. Landscape photographers, Canon 5D Mark II, awesome. People who are into cinematography, Canon 5D Mark II, all day long. Portrait photographers, newborn photographers, I'm starting to think it's a Nikon. But I can't just jump ship. I have to save up and make a plan. So
somebody asked what if you're shooting a family, what
Yeah, and let's go ahead and end the regular show and start answering questions from chat if they have them.
Okay.
So let's start with the one that this person had. What if you have a family that, let me read this. If you have a family that you're taking photos of, what focus mode would you use for each person is on a different plane? And I guess what you're saying is maybe they're stacked. You got people in front, you got maybe the shorter people in front, the taller people behind. Yeah. What focus mode would you use?
In that case, if I'm shooting a group of people and I have to, put people in the front, people in the back, so they're on different focal planes, I use all of my focus points, but I make sure that I don't have a shallow depth of field. You have to have a much smaller aperture so you can get a lot more people into focus. If you're trying to shoot wide open with that, you are certainly only going to get one person in focus and nobody else. So it's not as much about which focus point to use all of them, but then make sure that you have a really narrow aperture.
Now maybe I would do it wrong. I would generally I would use the center focus point and focus on the front person. But like you said, make sure you have an aperture that is going to have a significant depth of field to capture everybody in focus.
Yeah.
And if you don't really know, if you're new to that and you don't know, my distance and my focal length and my f-stop, how much am I going to get in focus with that? There's Android and iPhone apps you can download that will tell you. You can punch in those things, and it'll say you have 6 inches in focus. And you go, well, that's not going to be enough.
Right.
I need 2-3 feet. So your choices are either a different lens or a move back or stop down your lens.
And as a basic thing, I mean, you could just look at those images that the link that Scott put up earlier.
Yeah,
and that kind of gives you the basic. It's not as obviously advanced as the apps that you can get.
Yeah.
Darla also asked, do you still shoot in manual in that case or shoot in aperture mode? I always shoot in manual, but that's just your personal preference. Wouldn't you say, Mike?
Yeah. Oh, I think Dragos forgot to hit his "I'm still here" button.
Okay. Come on back, Dragos.
Because I had it a little bit ago. Is that what happened to you, Kathleen? You
I
got to
don't
hit-
know. I don't know what happened to mine. Oh,
Look,
we better
there it
do
is.
jpeg2RAWs.
Hold on. Yes, I'm still here.
Awesome.
I guess what I would do is I'd either go a matrix metering for that group, or I would do spot and look for the dark areas and the light areas and see what my difference was. At some point, if you have too big of a dynamic range, you're just not going to be able to match it. But
Right.
if it's not too bad, hopefully you got them in more even light, then it should be okay. You even go a matrix if you wanted to.
Right.
Just don't meter off. Don't choose the darkest or the brightest spot necessarily. You probably want to get the light as even as you could.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Did you forget?
well,
Did you miss the I'm still here?
I guess I didn't see that thing, but back on the other question, you guys probably went to the next question, I'm guessing.
No, not yet.
No, but we can go to it now.
So,
Oh,
also, the wider,
the
like,
lens?
let's say you're at an 80 millimeter. Yeah, the wider the lens you're using, the more things are going to be in focus. So if you're shooting a big group, you're probably not having to, shoot them at, depending on where you're at. If you're indoor, it's probably a little tight. So you're probably going to be at 18 millimeter or 16 millimeter, 16 millimeter, depending on, how big the group is, or you could be
Right.
24, depending on, full frame or crop or whatever.
Right.
But the wider the lens that you have, the more things are in focus. And also, let's say you're using an 18 millimeter. If people are standing still with an 18 millimeter, you can shoot at, let's say, 40th of a second, and get away with it just fine if people are actually, posing.
Right.
So, if you're using 40th of a second instead of 200ths of a second, if you were to use like an 85 millimeter or 100 millimeter, then you can actually raise the f-stop.
Right.
So the wider
That
you go, the lower the shutter speed you can use, which means the higher the f-stop you can use, so then you can get even more people in focus.
Right. That lower shutter speed is giving you the light that you'll need, but then
Right.
you can use a higher f-stop to keep everybody in focus, and you don't have a shallow depth of field. So with all those people, everyone's going to be in within the focus plane.
And I'm talking about natural light here.
Right.
If
Exactly.
you use flash, obviously you can bump up the power of the flash, and you can bump up the power of the flash. You can lower the shutter speed, and then you can raise the f-stop, and shutter speed only only changes the ambient light and how much your subject is being affected by ambient light with shutter speed. F-stop, you can they can affect the flash, and same as ISO.
B. Roberts asked, do you ever use f-stops higher than 9 when doing portrait photography? Just wondering if I need to be scared to go higher than that when doing a family session, for example. And no, you don't need to be scared going into high apertures. It's going to depend on what your light source is. Dragos and David use studio light, so you guys consistently shoot at higher apertures, don't you?
Yeah, I mainly shoot at f8, f9. That's where I believe the 70-200 is sharpest at.
Right, and they do a lot of portrait photography. So if you have lots of control over your light source, you don't need to be afraid of the aperture, basically, no matter where you want to use it, pretty much.
Right, but just know that, let's say you want the sharpest image possible, see what, like DP Review, what they post as that certain lens, if they reviewed it, what it's sharpest at. Because just as, lenses aren't as sharp at low f-stops, they start getting softer at high f-stop as well. So you'll get more things in focus, but whatever is in focus is going to be a little softer than it will be at f8 or f9 or f11, depending on what lens you're using. Some lenses go from f2.8 to f36 or 32.
Right, and your aperture, this is going back to the basics of aperture, but It depends on what you want in focus. You know, if you want to basically have all of the background and all of your people sort of, you know, looking like they're all kind of sharp and in focus, then using the higher aperture is going to do that. If you really want to have, you know, the blurred background and have your subject stand out from your background, then using a wider aperture and having that shallow depth of field is what's going to achieve that for you. But really, your aperture is going to really go off of what kind of light source you're using as to what your capabilities are.
Right.
Scott was asking about the D3S. Let's see, Scott here, if you'll be able to see this.
Wait, Scott was asking about Nikon? What?
He says, I can't find the term cross point anywhere in my D3S manual. That's because it's Nikon. Canon always tells you everything you need to know.
Well, I got it right here. So this is the D3S, 51-point phase detection autofocus with 15 cross-type sensors.
It's, yeah, there's some companies that call them cross point, some companies call them cross type. So Nikon might say cross type, Canon might say cross point.
Does anybody call them cross-sight?
No, I don't think so. No, I said cross type.
I know, I was making a joke. Kathleen got it.
Scott just added in that a good rule of thumb for aperture is that the number of your aperture, if you equal it to the number of people in your shot, then you're more likely to have all of the people in your shot in focus. And that's actually a really great rule. I personally, because I get nervous it's going to be in focus or not, if I've got 4 people in a shot, I try my darndest to at least use an f5. I always go a stop higher.
Yeah, I never knew that would work.
It does. It's worked for me.
I think it's just maybe the combination of where you're standing and the lens you're using. That shouldn't theoretically work. I mean, I don't think there's necessarily a connection there, the number of people versus the f-stop.
Well, they're probably thinking as a group thing. I mean, they're probably just making that. It's kind of like rule of thumb. I mean, can I get 10 people in focus with f2?
No.
No, yeah, I can.
What?
If they're all in the same plane.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. If they're all in the same plane.
If you're shooting, a wedding, you're probably going to put them in line. You could put them in line. You can have one behind the other. I mean, weddings are like different, but
that's a great point because we kind of touched on it, but and Scott's thing showed it. At f2, let's say your depth of field is only 6 inches, but it goes 6 inches the entire length of the frame.
Right.
From one edge to the other along that same plane.
Or almost the same plane, right?
Almost the same plane. If you're holding your camera exactly, pointed the right direction. So yeah, if you lined them all up like that, you would get them in focus.
Right. So it just depends on how you shoot. So yeah, I mean, if you shoot and it depends on what millimeters. There's no way you're gonna get 10 people in focus if you're shooting at let's say 300 millimeters at or 200 millimeters at f2.8. You know, because you could be at f10. And, well, I guess it depends on, how you're framing it and,
where you are.
Yeah, creatively, if you want to get creative with it, if you just want to get a group of people, so it's kind of like you just have to, there's sayings that they aren't there for anything, like the more practice makes perfect, and that's another thing, look at, kind of listen to what, all these little tips that you keep on hearing over and over and over and over again, like that, like practice makes perfect. You kind of just have to listen to them. The more you hear something, the more you have to listen. I never used a gray card, and now I don't even, I'll kind of look at the back of the camera, but if I want an image to look right, I use a light meter, And, I always saw, professional photographers using light meters, and I'm like, I don't need a light meter, I'm fine, or I don't need to do a white balance. I don't need to use a gray card, or I don't need to use all these, a white balance card. And then when I did the first time, I just wanted to kick myself in the, butt, because I'm like, I hear all these people
that off the get-go. Yeah.
I never listen. And then I was like, oh, let me try this. And then I'm like, wow, the images came out so much better because the white balance was on, the colors were right. You know, the exposure was right. I didn't even have to like turn my image a little. You know, I was shooting in studio, but it's just, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, listen to what like a lot of photographers say. You know, like practice makes perfect. And when it comes to something like that, it just depends on your shooting style, you know? Like, there's no way I'm going to get images of babies like she can down there. Because, you know...
What are we on Hollywood Squares?
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking in the live stream, she's actually
that way.
Yeah. But yeah, because I've only shot like maybe 25 pictures of a baby,
Right.
like in the studio.
Yeah.
So
right. Well, and like you said, practice makes perfect, man. I can show you an image of when I first started shooting newborns, and I owe some people their money back. I mean, it was a bad experience. It's taken me a long time and I still feel like I have a long ways to go. So
I shoot in some horribly lit, both in the quantity and quality lit gems. So I carry a gray card with me, at all times.
Yeah.
And then I even have this little thing, which has got 2 different shades of gray, a black, and a white. So you can do quite a bit with it.
Kelly asked, should I be focusing on a shadow which has more contrast, such as the shadow under the nose or the eyelid?
There you go. I like that.
I like that too.
Ooh, I like the last one.
Yeah, Dragos, that's cool.
Flip to the last thing.
This thing?
Yeah, I like that too.
Right, that's the color
checker.
A little color checker. And that's an Expo disc or a white balance. I don't think it works very well.
Okay.
And then that's the gray card I use.
Mine's starting to get pretty beat up.
And it actually has a mirror on it as well, so the model can, do touch-ups or whatever.
Well, that's cool.
And you can hang it around your neck.
Yeah, mine's getting pretty beat up. But, okay, back to Kelly's question.
She said, should I be focusing on a shadow which has more contrast, such as the shadow under the nose or the eyelid? For me, if people's eyes are open, I focus on the eyeball itself, the closest one to me. If they're looking at me square, I tend to focus on, well, it depends on which focus point I'm using. So I could really use either. It depends on how I'm composing my shot. If it's a child, like if it's a newborn and their eyes are closed, I always focus on the crease of the eye, because I feel like that's where your eye goes in the photograph, is to the eyelids of the baby.
Right, and that's where it should go, right.
I would never focus under a shadow under the nose, because you don't want that to be the sharpest focus in your image.
Well, see, it depends on what type of photography does she do. Is she talking about like regular portraits? Is she shooting at f1.2? Because in your case, yeah, you definitely don't want to focus on anything else but where you want the person to look. If they're shooting at f8, I mean, from, let's say, 10 feet away, just focus on the face, or
focus on the face.
But I would always focus on the eye. If if the focus point is big enough to just focus on the eye, focus on the eye.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get enough contrast, because there's eyelashes, and there's the pupil, the retina, depending on how close you are, and I would always focus on the eye.
I will say, Kelly, that I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of times when I have blonde-haired babies, blonde eyelashes, man,
That's
talk
tough,
about hunting for focus. It gets crazy. And that is when those cross points would really, really, really come in handy, because there's very low contrast on an eyelid of a baby who has blonde hair and white eyelids. Or eyelashes, I should say.
You should, well, it's not that easy, is it? How easy is it to, I don't think it's that easy, but you can set it up to where you can use live view mode and focus in.
Okay.
And manually focus.
Yeah. Manually focus.
Like that.
Oh, man. I should charge extra for the blonde-haired babies, right?
Yeah.
You should charge less because you're blonde.
Yeah, I know.
Take baby photos of you, so.
I'm not sure what this is. Is a photo vision target the same as using a gray card for white balance?
It is. I have a photo vision target, and it's in my car because I haven't unpacked for my photo shoot this morning. But it is. It's a gray card that has like a white circle in the center with a white crosshair that goes across it.
Okay.
Well, it depends. What do you want to use the gray card for? Because you could use the gray card for white balance, and you can use the gray card for exposure as well. So which one is it?
How do you use it for? What do you mean for exposure?
You meter off the gray card. You put the gray card in your light, and you meter off the gray card.
Oh, I've never done that.
Yeah.
Now here's something for you, Dragos. So this is the gray card I got from Wolf Camera.
Yeah, I had one of those and I lost it, and I don't know why.
It's the standard 18% gray, whatever it is.
Yep.
If you buy the Lightroom book from Scott Kelby, you get this one in the back of the book. You can see there are obviously two different shades of gray.
Right.
Yeah, this one, of course, being lighter. So
Well, I think that one is only the lighter one. You can only use, that's not 18% gray.
no, it's definitely not 18%.
So
gray.
it's only, that's why there's a couple of gray cards. Like a lot of people use a white balance card for white balance. And I think that's the only thing you can use the grayer one for.
Okay.
I mean the whiter one. You can only use it for white balance, but not because it's not 18% gray.
Yeah.
You can't use that for exposure.
Right.
Okay.
So you can still use it because I went out and tested it and did some white balance testing with it, and really it was so close that I couldn't really tell much of a difference. So I can white balance off of either one of these.
Mm-hmm.
I just can only use this one for exposure.
Right. Yeah. You can only. That's why when you get a gray card, it will say 18% gray. It's letting you know that you can actually expose off of it as well.
Okay.
Because I'm guessing if they didn't have the 18%, if they didn't have two versions of gray cards, they would all be 18% gray, and they wouldn't even have to add that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Looks like my bag is starting to rip. Yeah.
Need a new one.
Yeah.
Joy Rossi, I hope I'm saying that right, says,
Hold on. Did that other person? Did they get their answer from what we said?
about
The one with the gray card.
There's a slight delay between
is
what
the
we say
photo
and what they
vision
do.
target the same as using a gray card for white balance?
I think we answered that one.
I think so.
For white okay, so it's for white balance, yeah.
Yeah. The next one is, do you ever shoot higher f-stops to get more in focus and then add blur to recreate shallow depth of field in post-processing?
I'm not good at that. If that can be done successfully, it's not done by me. I can't do that well.
Forget that.
Yeah, I will admit that I've tried it before I knew how to use my aperture correctly. I don't think it's something you can fake. Because,
Yeah, you really...
Because then it looks like your blur is on the same plane as your subject, which your blur should be behind your subject. And so I will a lot of times use like a Gaussian blur for a artistic effect, but not to create shallow depth of field anymore. Like the image I have, Mike, of my kids jumping on the bed.
Yep, who guessed that one?
You did.
But something's not right here. You did I will say that you did an excellent job with that.
Oh, thank you.
And it was not apparent right at first, but then I said, wait a second. You got one kid's on the front of the bed, one kid's on the back of the bed. Is blur underneath both of their feet, but both of their heads are in focus? How's that possible?
I wanted to bring attention to their faces.
Yeah, and so for that standpoint, it really made the image look great.
Yeah, and they were jumping on the bed. It was one of those artistic, anything goes types of pictures. And so I was like, I want to bring more attention to their faces. And so it was a very slight Gaussian blur, and I masked it out 100% off of their faces. And then after their faces, I masked it out about 50% around the halo of their bodies, and then about, 20 or 15%, even a little bit bigger, so it gradually went out. But then really the only things that were left in sharp focus on the image were their two sweet little faces.
Yeah.
And they were blurred anyways because they were jumping on the bed, and I wanted that blur to show the action, so it worked.
And I mean, you can definitely use it. It's just, I wouldn't I
wouldn't
wouldn't
count on it.
recommend on shooting wide, knowing that you're gonna want to blur it.
No, no.
Not for
Get
not for
your
an image
app.
that you're wanting to sell. I would think if it's photography is an art. If you're wanting to do it for an artistic photo, that's one thing. If you're wanting to sell it as a portrait, that may be something else.
Right, now you can shoot blurry and add even more blur, but that only a little bit. But you don't want to blur it to where you're trying to fake the
Depth of field.
depth of field, like
Yes.
bokeh or whatever people call it.
Mm-hmm.
You can just like with vignetting, just to attract the
Draw
view
attention.
to something.
Right.
Yeah.
Draw attention to something, but not trying to fake, low aperture,
Right.
Because it's gonna look fake. And
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Some photographers like me, I hate fake stuff. That's why, even for video, I hate doing green screen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather do on location somewhere where it's not that great instead of like making it look like they're in Maui.
Right.
Because photographers will just look at it as not that great of work.
Right. I mean, technically you can do anything you want to do, but our advice, I would say as a whole, that if your goal is to have the shallow depth of field look, then achieve that by using correct apertures and don't try and fake it in Photoshop.
Right.
It
Because
won't
then
come out.
it looks fake.
It looks fake.
Now, when you're trying to get like tilt shift, you can easily fake tilt shift
Yeah.
type of out of focus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of,
Well, you say easily. I tried to do it several times and messed them all up. But yeah, I've seen where people do it. Yeah.
You can't fake.
Is the tilt shift like what the Lens Baby does?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you'll get that sharpness just like you did, but you'll get it on one straight plane.
Yeah. If you guys want to
like
really
my
create...
face, let's say you want my face in focus, and depending on how you how you tilt the focus and how you shift it, you can have my face this way, and then like it will be sharp all the way through here.
Yeah.
And then over here it'll go to blur, and then over here it'll go to blur.
If you
but
guys
it's not just
want...
regular blur; it's also kind of like stretching.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like looking through glass, because what you're doing is looking through glass at an angle.
Right.
So
Let's take...
you have to do a couple of effects, but you can fake that, just not f-stop blur.
We're coming up on the 2-hour mark, so we need to go ahead and wrap up. But I do want to answer this one last question somebody asked about using an expo disc. I think, Dragos, you said that one of your things there was an expo disc, and I think they're asking, gray card versus an expo disc. What would you recommend?
Expo disc, like there's the one that you like put right in front of the lens, the round one. I forgot what company sells that.
I would think she's probably talking about that one, but
Expo Imaging.
Yeah.
Right. You can use that. You can even use that for. Actually, I'm not using. They say that you can use it for white balance. I'm not sure if you can use it for white balance.
Well, the expo disc you can't. You put it on the front of the lens, point it toward the light source,
Right.
and then it's supposed to meter off that.
Right. And I mean that's a quick way of doing things. There's.
But did you guys talk about how it has to fit every lens you have?
Yeah, so get the biggest one.
Get the biggest one so you can stick it in front of it. You won't be able to screw it on or anything, but you can stick it in front of it.
Yeah, get like an 80 or whatever. Yeah, 80-some millimeter, I think, the biggest that they have.
Yeah.
They're not cheap, though.
No, they're not. They're like $100, I think, or something
Yeah,
like that.
at least.
I'd rather just use this thing.
Right.
I did have to get the manager, because all the people that worked out front had never heard of one of these at Wolf Camera. So I had to get the manager to come out, and then I had to explain to him what it was, and they went back in the back room and found it.
What?
Yeah.
That's pretty scary.
Well, hold on. Anyways, I don't know. Just because they work there doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Right,
That's
it's
true.
true.
That goes with anything.
Well,
But yeah, Expo Disc would work great. It's just you have to point it not at the subject, at the
light source.
at the light source. And what it does is it will turn. So you put in front of the lens. You'll put it, let's say, on an aperture priority or whatever you think. Let's say aperture priority. I mean, I would hope that you would always use f2.8 hopefully or 1.4, but you put it on whatever aperture you're controlling and what you want to shoot at, and then you point it at the sun or at the light source, and you take a picture in aperture priority. And then you look at the image, it will come out gray. It will come out 18% gray, the photo that you're going to have. And it will tell you what settings it took that image at. And then you go in manual and set it to that.
Yeah, and I might have misspoke. It's the Expo. This is only for white balance. I think I accidentally said exposure at one
Yeah,
point.
that's not for exposure.
But it's only for white balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. That's
Only
my
for-
understanding.
Only
That's
for
my
white-
understanding too. It's just for white balance.
The Expo disc, is that right?
Correct.
Is it? Well, I
That
could
was my understanding. I never knew, but then again, I never knew that I could use my gray card for exposure. So what do I know?
I think it's also for exposure, hence the name Expo Disc, but
Oh, that would make sense.
I'm not, I mean,
Well,
if you guys are saying that, like, I thought it was for exposure as well, but we looked it
It's
up.
described as Expodus Professional Digital White Balance Filters provide fast custom white balance with exceptional accuracy.
Huh.
That's right off the
Yeah,
website.
and I think you pointed at the light source for the white balance gathering. I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
You pointed at the light source. That is correct.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we're coming up on 2 hours. We need to wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Dragos, thank you for coming out. Where can people find some of your work or get in touch with you?
Facebook. Our Studio D&D website's not up. My Dragos photography is not. It's still under construction.
Do you guys have a Facebook group or a Facebook page?
Studio D&D, but we don't. We just opened it up. We just opened the studio up like 3 months ago, and we've been. I mean, I've been here working my butt off every day, and it's.
Once you have something, just let me know, and I'll put it in the show note. I'll go back into the show and add it into the show
Okay,
note.
but yeah, I mean, on Facebook, I have. If you want to type in there my name, Dragos, or I will.
Yeah, I'll add that to the show notes too. So
Okay.
people can
Put
go
your
there.
name in the chat, Dragos. Type it in, your full name, so they can copy and paste it into Facebook.
All right.
None of us dare to pronounce his last name, so
I know, right?
that's why we're making him type it in. We'd butcher it.
And guess what? Here is the link to their Facebook.
Dun dun dun.
Yep, and I just found it.
Yep, and we don't have that much work on there. We're still kind of going in between our old pages. But Dragos Weddings is kind of the only one, and I just got that up like last week as well. So it's still being worked on.
Well, I went to your.
I normally do fashion and shoot weddings.
I visited your studio a couple months ago. I think it was now.
Yep.
Back when you were first moving in, you hadn't really done much yet, and you had some great photos in there. So even when they were just lying around, there was already some great work in there.
Thank you. But yeah, it's not that easy to open a studio.
Yeah.
No, I can. That is a huge step. You guys are. I'm excited for you guys. That's a huge step, and
Yeah. It's bigger than I thought, but hey,
I wish you guys all the luck. Y'all both very
sacrifice. Thank you.
both very talented. I say both because Dragos' partner, I think he was out here earlier. David.
David Firestein.
Yeah, I think he was out there earlier.
I didn't see him.
Oh,
Yeah.
was he? What did he say? I know he's always got something to
There
say
was a
about.
there was a David out there. Maybe I was just assuming it was him. Maybe it's
I'm
somebody
sure
else.
it was him. I mean, well, by the way, he's the one that lent me all of the Canon paraphernalia. So,
Right.
Because he works for Canon.
yeah. I do want to let people know, since we still have 24 viewers in there, that we're trying to keep about one show a month open without a guest that's talking about their photography, so that we can answer questions, talk about photography issues, dig a little bit deeper so that we can all learn. And I know for myself, I'm learning a lot because we come up with this topic and I spend so much time Googling and trying to figure it out and calling people like Dragos and saying, explain it to me because I have no clue, so that we can be helpful on the show. So if you guys have specific questions, drop us an email, put it on the jpeg2RAW group, And if we can't get to it on the group, we can always keep it, in our back pocket and use it as a topic for a show at some point. So we appreciate you guys having the questions and throwing them out there to us.
And if you're not part of the group already, join the group. We're changing things up all the time. Right now, we're having post your favorite photos week. Every day you post your favorite photo, and we'll change that up next week. One of the things we want to do is help people advance in their photography. So right now, we're just kind of posting your favorite. I got to think about how we would do this. I'd love to have where we could critique, offer helpful critiques, but that's always a very touchy subject, and it can get
it is.
It can get harsh. So I've avoided that for now, and I probably will continue to avoid it. But we want to have those topics and have those discussions in our group. So join our group if you're not in there. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, because you can't always make it out to the live things, go to the website. We have links to iTunes, to if any RSS feeder you want to subscribe to the podcast, and then you get it. I generally have it out before the next weekend, and you can subscribe to that. We will do another giveaway at some point. Tonight we ended our giveaway with Sarah, but I'm sure we'll have another giveaway coming up soon. I'm thinking about what that can be, and I'm working on a couple of things. And Kathleen mentioned having things open. If you want to see what our schedule is, on the jpeg2RAW page, there's a forums. If you go to the forums, there's a calendar there, and I've posted this several times in the group. In that calendar, anytime we book somebody, I go in that calendar and put their name in there and what show it is. So you can go to that calendar and see who we have coming up, because we have quite a few really good photographers coming up.
Yeah. Jennifer Deming had a good point. She says maybe people can post photos in the group and prompt for critique if they're open to it. I like that idea. You can post a picture, and then if you are open to it, you can say open to CC, which is constructive criticism. And if they don't say it, then don't say it.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's a trick. It's a kind of a hard subject, because be ready for I mean, I know everybody hopefully is professional and gives critiques that are nice. But there will be some of those, people that might not be so nice.
Yeah, tactful, right?
Yeah, and in the end, it's an art, so
right, and that's
not everybody's taste is going to be the same.
Right, and when somebody critiques it, now if you see what's wrong, don't and you agree with that person, then you can fix it. And if it's a creative thing, like, I don't like your creative editing, or I think it went too far, let's say, or whatnot, just be fine with that too. So either take it or don't, but don't be mad,
Right.
So because you are asking for critique, and that's art, so different people like doing things differently. So
That very, very true. But check out who we have coming up, and we have
Who's next week?
Oh, next week, yes, good point. Next week there is no show because next week is Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's right.
And Kathleen's husband has a gun, and if I kept her, on Valentine's Day, he may not be too happy, and I don't want him mad at me. So, and probably my wife would like me to spend some time with her on Valentine's Day too,
as well as mine.
So no show next week. Allow us to catch up on some things. And the week after that, we have, who is it, Heidi? I can't say her last name, but from Heidi Hope. Photography, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be an exciting show. She's got some great stuff.
Yeah. All right. So everybody out there, thank you for coming out.
Thank you, everyone.
Hang out for a second after we end this here.
Okay.
I'm going to end the live stream.
Okay.
So we'll see you on the 21st, everybody.
Good night, guys. See you later.
Okay.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
good night.